Joe, thanks for getting us back and delighted to be with all of you. Hopefully, you hung in there for a few minutes while we rebooted and you got to see the 1 minute, very short version of the story of the Maccabees and Hanukkah. So, again, I just want to offer some building blocks of how the Jews came to the holiday of Hanukkah. If you were to say, Rabbi, open up the Hebrew Bible and show me where the holiday of Hanukkah comes from, you'd actually be throwing me a curveball right off the bat. So here I have, whoops, I think it looks upside down to you. Um, the Hebrew Bible, and you will not find. So you just have to trust me on this one. You're not going to find in the Hebrew Bible anything at all about the Maccabees and the story of the holiday of Hanukkah. So please take my word for that. And you might ask, well, then, Rabbi, where does the story come from? And I'm glad you asked. We actually can thank the Catholic Church for going beyond the limits of the Hebrew Bible to have in what we call the Apocrypha, the hidden books, to actually include, and these are Jewish writings preserved by the Catholic Church in the Apocrypha that happens to include, yeah, give me a little drum roll here, happens to include the story of the Maccabees. So, Joe, if you would, let's get a feel for what that story is. That is perfect. That's perfect. If you could just a little more so I can see the line above it, Joe. Um, yeah, so we are in the actually one line up, Joe, so I can just show people. Yeah, so we're in 1 Maccabees, and this is chapter 4. And now for me just to read, and you'll see where the holiday comes from. So this is called Cleaning and Dedication of the Temple, and we're talking about the temple in Jerusalem. And by the way, we're talking about the year right now, about 160 of the before the Common Era. And it is after a 7-year battle. And let's see if we can put some of the pieces together. Then Judah and his brothers said, "See, our enemies are crushed. Let us go up and clean the sanctuary and dedicate." And this is where the word Hanukkah comes from. It is dedicate, Hanukkah, rededication of the temple. So all the army assembled and went up to Mount Zion. There they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profaned, and the gates burned. In the courts they saw bushes sprung up as in a thicket or as on one of the mountains. They saw also the chambers of the priests in ruins. Joe, if you could scroll up, please. Perfect. Then they tore their clothes and mourned with great lamentation. They sprinkled themselves with ashes. They fell face down on the ground. And when the signal was given with the trumpeters, they cried out to heaven. Then Judas detailed men to fight against those in the citadel until he had cleansed the sanctuary. Scroll down, if you would, to the bolden words, Joe. Yeah, that's great. Early in the morning, on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is the month of Kislev, in the 148th year, they rose and offered sacrifice, and the law directs on the new altar of the burnt offerings. here. So they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days and joyfully offered burnt offerings. They offered a sacrifice of well-being and thanksgiving. Scroll down a little bit more, Joe. Perfect, right there. Then Judas and his brothers and all the assembly of Israel determined that every year at that season, the days of dedication of the altar should be observed with joy and gladness for 8 days, beginning with the 25th day of the month of Kislev. So we have a lot of information here. We know that in the month of Kislev, on the 25th day, there's going to be an 8-day celebration clearly connected to the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem. So the only additional context I want to offer you in the limited time we have tonight, that if you turn the clock back 7 years, the Jewish community, and this is the time of the Seleucid Empire, Syrian Greek Empire, were beginning to impose a different religion on the Jewish people, not allowing the Jews to practice their religion as they chose to. So you could say that this battle, and it was Judah and his brother's father, Mattathias, that said, we are going to draw the line here. We will not abide by a religion that's being imposed upon us. And actually, this family was prepared to fight for it. So that is, and this was a 7-year battle, a classic, the few against the many. And it was one of the sons, Judah, who actually is known as the real warrior in the family. If you were to go to West Point, they have bronze busts of military heroes throughout the centuries. And you will actually find a bust at West Point, I have not seen this in person, of Judah the Maccabee. And why Judah the Maccabee? That he and his brothers and the Maccabees are known for the innovation of the strategy of guerrilla warfare. If you are just a small army against the great empire, you better come up with another strategy other than pure numbers and might. Joe, if you would, so now this is in the second book of Maccabees. Let me read these 9 verses. Perfect. Now, Maccabeus and his followers, the Lord leading them on, recovered the temple and the city. They tore down the altars that had been built in the public square by the foreigners and also destroyed the sacred precincts. They purified the sanctuary and made another altar of sacrifice. Then, striking fire out of flint, they offered sacrifices after a lapse of 2 years. They offered incense and lighted lamps and set out the bread of the presence. When they had done this, they fell prostrate and implored the Lord that they might never again fall into such misfortunes, but that if they should ever sin, they might be disciplined by him with forbearance and not be handed over to blasphemous and barbarous nations. It happened that on the same day on which the sanctuary had been profaned by the foreigners, the purification of the sanctuary took place. That is, on the 25th day of the same month, which was Kislev. And now let me just read this last bold part, Joe. Perfect. They celebrated for 8 days with rejoicing in the manner of the Festival of Booths, remembering how not long before, during the Festival of Booths, they had been wandering in the mountains and caves like wild animals. Therefore, carrying ivy-wreathed wands and beautiful branches and also fronds of palm, they offered hymns of thanksgiving to him who had given success to the purifying of his own holy place. So keep this text on the screen, if you would, Joe, just as we have it. So I'm going to invite those that are listening right now that you to enter in the chat. What does, if you hear that the Maccabees were celebrating a holiday like the Festival of Booths. Do you know what the Festival of Booths are? If we've got any Bible readers here, you might know what this holiday is, and one that's offered with branches and fronds of palm and hymns of thanksgiving. So what is it? And that is an 8-day holiday. So what is it that they seem to be celebrating? And then a question, with what you know about Hanukkah, what seems to be missing from this story? So 2 questions. What is it that they seem to be celebrating during these 8 days? And what seems to be missing with what you know about the story of Hanukkah? And I'm just going to wait for a moment and see if we have any responses to that. What do you think they're celebrating? What's missing? And so far, there's not a flurry of responses, which is fine. And sometimes it just takes another few seconds for people to offer anything. So I'm going to wait about 15 seconds, Joe, and then I'm going to offer some responses. So I'm going to, so Kimberly Bartman, thank you very much. What's missing? The oil is missing. Ding, 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 ding. So fabulous. And let me just offer, and this is our story, the book of Maccabees. It's a Jewish story, again, thankfully preserved in the Apocrypha by the Catholic Church. So we have this reading, and but there is no story about a miracle of oil at all. In fact, it seems like, and Joe, and it's okay, the text has gone blurry again, but we're not going to start over because I've got my own backup here, which is fine. So when they're talking about, they're celebrating in the manner of the Festival of Booths for 8 days with branches and palm fronds. Trust me, everybody, this is the holiday known as Sukkot, that we dwell in a sukkah, and that we, as part of its 8 days, and we have what we call the lulav, that is comprised of branches and palm fronds, and we sing Hallel, songs of praise to God. So that's what seems to be going on here, and that makes perfect sense, because while they were fighting, and and the text that we read was very specific. When they were fighting, wandering in the mountains and caves like wild animals, it was during Sukkot. They did not get to celebrate it, so they're making up for it. It's actually in a completely different month, but now they'll connect that celebration with rededicating the temple. So you might ask, and Kimberly, you did ask, well, then where's the oil? So here we go. This is now, so we're leaving a military victory, and now we're going to a text that is known as the Talmud. This was actually put together about 500 of the Common Era. So about 1,500 years ago. We have a writing in Joe, I would say, you can scroll. I'm not going to read from that. And actually, Joe, if the texts are, why don't you just take that off altogether, because it's only going to be a little disruptive. So I am going to share what the rabbis taught. Again, this is a good 500-600 years after what we just read in the book of Maccabees. And the rabbis taught on the 25th day of Kislev, the days of Hanukkah, which are 8, on which lamentation for the dead and fasting are forbidden. For when the Seleucids entered the temple, they defiled all of the oils therein. And when the Hasmonean dynasty prevailed, the Hasmonean dynasty is what captures the Maccabees. They're known as the Hasmoneans. Prevailed and defeated them. And here we go, folks. They made search and found only one cruse of oil, which lay with the seal of the high priest, but which contained sufficient for 1 day's lighting only. And now here we go. Yet a miracle was wrought therein, and they lit the lamp therewith for 8 days. The following year, these days were appointed a festival with the recital of Hallel, which are psalms, which are words of thanksgiving. And there we have what actually is the Hebrew word for it is, it's a little bit of chutzpah. The story of the Maccabees is in the book of Maccabees. And it's wonderful each year. And by the way, tomorrow night is the 25th day of Kislev. That's when we begin the holiday. But now we've got a holiday that is both a military victory, but the rabbis actually evolve that holiday with no mention of, they downplay the military victory, and they creatively offer, I would say, they create another dimension to the celebration of Hanukkah, which is a miracle of one little bit of oil only to last